Hello, I want to welcome everyone to The Power of Our Stories, Wounds to Wisdom, Healing Through Veteran and First Responder Narratives, Author Storytelling Night. We are a community where veterans, first responders, and all protectors can connect, share their experiences, and heal together. So tonight, I want to introduce Chad Bruckner. Chad is a retired Pennsylvania police detective and combat veteran, served 13 years in law enforcement and 8 years in the United States Army. Today, he is a small business owner, professional speaker, coach, and humanitarian. Chad holds a master's degree in digital forensics and is a certified recovery specialist. As a coach, his aim is to help individuals and organizations reach their full potential in performance and morale, beginning with a balanced, holistic, and healthy lifestyle. And anybody watching this, you can connect with Chad at www.motivate-change.com, and that will all be on the description on YouTube. So, Chad, thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you, Sarah. You've been a great steward of not only my story, but so many others. And that's not something to say lightly. I mean, this is a vulnerable story that I'm going to read, and so many others, like all of these are vulnerable, and you've been a great caretaker of those stories and a great leader on this project. So without further ado, I'd like to get into Wounds to Wisdom, Chapter 20, The Wisdom of Forgiveness by me. In February 2008, 30 months after serving in Iraq, I was hired as a police officer. I remember standing in my suit, my new bride next to me. Kristen and I were married just 5 months earlier. She held the Bible in her hand while I listened intently to the mayor read the creed in a public session. Council members sat behind me. The chief of police stood inches away. How could I have known that the very creed I swore an oath to would betray me? It was a happy night, glorious. My parents, in-laws, siblings, and grandparents were in attendance. I breezed right through the field training program. My FTO remarked that no one had ever gone through the program with such ease. I was 27 years old and I had combat experience. I served 8 years in the U.S. Army as an infantry leader. I was nearly killed in Iraq while leading combat missions. However, I didn't recognize my own self-confidence in those early days as an officer. In my 13-year career, I was a great police officer. After much reflection, I can say that with peace and confidence. I have a huge heart. I cared a great deal, and I was exceptional in my role. I developed high value relationships, not only with members of my agency, but surrounding agencies as well. I became a resource for other cops. I'm the guy who would give my last few dollars to a stranger in need over my own kids because my children know we'll be okay in the end. Helping brings me a sense of purpose. I love people and enjoy meeting them where they are in life, and that is not always easy. I have held the dead and injured in my arms, including children. I would do every bit of it again, even the bad stuff, because it is all part of the package of human service. But it comes at a cost. My third year on, there was an opening for detective. I was ready. I had proven myself to be a top performer on the street. However, I was passed over for a female officer who did not work nearly as hard. The chief disclosed to me that I was more the qualified candidate, but he was going to promote the other officer. He assured me my time would come. I had a front row seat to politics over people. I was confused about this promotion process because watching the newly promoted detective underperform in her duties only lowered my self esteem. Was merit not the standard? Nevertheless, I pressed on, committing myself to service. 1 year later, I was chomping at the bit for more opportunities to serve, but there were no more detective openings. So I did what any determined young cop who cares about his community would do. I created my own detective division and pitched it to the chief. I called it the Street Crimes Unit, SCU. It was my take on fixing our community's open air drug market. The chief embraced it. I worked this unit for 1 month alone without any supervision. Then my partner Nick joined me from patrol. Together, the two of us spent a lot of time cleaning up the streets. An ambitious patrol sergeant took notice and began his climb to become our supervisor. Over time, we had a lot of success, arresting more than 250 felony drug dealers, violent offenders, and people negatively affecting the quality of life in town. The street crimes unit reduced crime by 40%. It was incredible. While in the military, I'd been a part of some successful operations, but nothing like this. I literally smiled as I fell asleep because of the positive impact we were having. If only I could have bottled up that feeling and saved it for later. Here's the thing about success: it can create monsters. The ambitious patrol sergeant schemed and found a way to remove the existing detective sergeant from his position so he could take over. He became my first line supervisor, and he would use this position for personal gain. With every arrest we made, the ambitious sergeant, once sitting on the periphery, was now getting accolades for the work my partner and I were doing. His sphere of influence grew, and I was perfectly fine with that. After all, we were a team. We were supposed to work together and rise together. After working with the sergeant every day for 7 years, having been exposed to his secrets and soul, I saw a broken man. He was no team player and seemed to enjoy hurting others to make himself feel better. For example, he once denied my request for a bereavement day when my wife, Kristen, suffered an ectopic miscarriage. He suggested I use a vacation day instead. I was confused, so I went over his head to the chief. I filed a complaint. This was a difficult time for me and Kristen, and I couldn't process why my first line supervisor was working against me. The chief admonished him, and the sergeant offered an apology. It was another lesson in dealing with broken men within a broken system. Truth, I was broken too, but I would have happily used a vacation day so I could be present with my wife. My issue was that the ambitious sergeant created an unfair system. The rules were different depending on who was playing. In 2019, 11 years into my policing career, I got so low, I began having suicidal ideations. I contemplated ending my life, ending my pain. I couldn't see a path forward, and the hopelessness led to great despair. I told my wife that I thought about driving my car off an overpass. I was scared and emotional. Being betrayed by my own organization was brutal. I gave so much of myself to that agency. I forged meaningful relationships. I matured and grew on a personal level because of it. It was literally my second home. Betrayal that comes from within one's own police department is a hurt that cannot be put into words. It's been several years since my incident, and I'm still working through it. You see, the ambitious sergeant later became my chief, and within 18 months, I was back on patrol. I did not request this assignment. That decision was made on the heels of a complaint made against him for the way in which he administered a promotional process. The whole department signed the memo, and me and my partner, being the most outspoken, paid the price for it. In all my years in public service, military, and law enforcement, I never had disciplinary issues. Sure, I made mistakes, but I was always professional. This move was personal, and everyone knew it. The anger I felt was unbearable. I couldn't sleep. I wanted vengeance. I felt I had little control over my life. The besiege of negativity was too much. Anger and insecurity took over during the day. Anxiety and fear ruled the night. I began drinking to mask the pain and shame. I developed such a hatred and resentment for public service. I began to see everybody as a fake and phony. It wasn't fair to label everyone that way, but I had had enough. After 13 years, I submitted my notice to retire and was gone 3 weeks later. It was a painful exit. No exit interviews. No one from the municipality asked questions. I'd given so much to my community. I paid an emotional mental price to keep them safe. I missed family events. It's what service required. And I was left feeling like a giant fool. So I did what fools do: tuck tail and run. I was hurting, nearing burnout. I was a ticking time bomb. At home, I would excuse myself to the basement to sit in solitude with a 4-pack to self-medicate my sorrows. I would wake the next morning with a masked smile. I hid my true feelings. The shame was real, like nothing I'd ever felt before. I was not equipped to properly identify the shame, and that was dangerous. Someone told me, quote, "Don't let them know they won. Keep it inside," end quote. That was the worst advice. I was struggling to pick up the pieces. I was no longer a cop. I would have to find new ways to serve. It was a challenge. My wife, Kristen, reminded me of the important mission ahead. Quote, "You have a beautiful family who loves you and looks to you for leadership," she said. "Our kids think the world of you. Isn't that enough?" End quote. Asking for help was the greatest gift I gave myself. I had so much to lose and so many loving relationships. I can't believe that I ever thought of ending my life. I still have so much to contribute, and yet my light was almost extinguished. That won't happen again. My second greatest gift was to forgive, learning to move and grow from the pain. Forgiveness requires a lot of work, time, and emotion, but I remain committed to forgiving my former chief. Forgiveness ultimately serves the soul, setting an example for others in a broken world. The end.
Oh, Chad, that was so powerful. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing that because I cannot imagine what that betrayal felt like. And I know, we've all heard stories of incredibly painful betrayals. And I think just knowing you and um hearing how wholehearted you were, how much you loved the job, how much you loved to serve, how much you spearheaded this program, and to hear what happened, I can imagine how devastating that was. And yet you're here to share your comeback story, how you navigated through it, and with a whole different perspective. Before we shut off the recording and have a great talk, um, where are you at now, and what have you learned from that whole experience?
Our friend Jeremy, in the power of our story, he has helped me tremendously. He actually recommended a movie to me last year that I watched, and man, it really helped me from the perspective of forgiveness. And there's a scene in the movie where the father who had his daughter killed, raped, and murdered. He wanted to forgive the murder, but he just had no idea how you do that because he knew I'm only going to be happy and live a joyful life if I can forgive. And so he learned to just keep saying it over and over and over again. I forgive him. I forgive him. I forgive him. And that was actually a powerful lesson for me, or a powerful exercise for me, because I did do that. I mean, for the second half of 2024, I would write it down in a notebook, say it in my head. And there was power in manifesting that, because now at this time in 2025, I do forgive him. He is a broken man. I know not what he did was intentional. I think he was governed by just a whole host of immoral and unethical and broken stuff inside of him. So if he's broken, of course he's going to take broken actions. And so Jeremy actually helped me get over forgiving him. So sitting here today, I feel in a great place. I'm back on the street as a cop. I'm working at the university that I graduated from, and so it's just a cool full circle moment. I never wanted to leave the job, to be honest, and it took 3.5 years in the wilderness to figure it out, and here I am back at it. So I'm grateful for it all. Really, those lessons. I always preach about this. Those lessons, if we waste those hard times, and I did before when I was younger in the military, I didn't appreciate resilience and digging into those hard moments. I wanted to not think about it or push away from it. But we're robbing ourselves the ability to learn, and to develop our resilience and become wise through these humble lessons. And so I'm grateful for it all. I mean, sitting here, meeting everyone on the power of our story, writing a book, a couple books now, is all part of the journey, and I've learned to embrace it and celebrate it.
That's awesome. It's really great to see that energy back. I always think too, when people are trying to make their way and make a name for themselves, people with, like you said, just the biggest heart, the most energy, that really genuinely love the job or love the people, are the biggest threat. So it's almost like it's no surprise, but it's wonderful how you've turned that around and you've found another place to really give and pour into, and you have your beautiful family, and we get you here for the Wounds to Wisdom project, and just all the impact your story is going to make. So, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming and sharing your story.
Thank you. As my dog in the background. Sorry.